Voting is very important for economics because voting is how we make collective decisions. Professor Roberts told us that we should try and make more personal decisions rather than collective decisions, and we'd be better off. On the other hand, we don't have a choice in the sense that many decisions in our lives are collective and we have to make them somehow, and we use voting to make the decisions. So here's a basic question. Why do views differ when facts are the same? This question can be asked in the context of economics, and it can be asked in the context of politics. In Israel, it's in particular asked in the context of the peace process. And when I talk about the peace process, I talk to people living here. Now, ideology can determine what you see and determine what you believe. And there are studies by a colleague, actually, of Professor Roberts, that people believe what they want to believe. And they choose what they want to believe to maximize their utility. Now, if this is so, if people believe what they want to believe, and what do they choose to believe? They choose to believe that which makes them feel good about themselves, or that which makes them look good to others, for which we can go back to the theory of moral sentiments, as again Professor Roberts told us. Now, in Israel, as everywhere else, we have the left and we have the right. The left in general is in favor of collective action, and the right is more in favor of personal freedom. In Israel, we have a very strange situation. I came to this country as a young man, and I was very puzzled for many years about where I was. It took me a long time to work out what's going on here as far as I understood it. I tell people that in Tel Aviv, for example, if you start from the south of Tel Aviv and start heading north, you start from right-wing voters and start going north. You end in Ramat Aviv Gimel, where all the left-wing voters are, but not all of them are left-wing there, and income goes up. So I observe a strange phenomenon that in Israel, the richer you are, the more likely you are to vote for the left, which is exactly the converse of almost any other country that I know, except the only parallel close to what I observed here in Israel was observed in Russia or Soviet Union after the fall of communism. But we can. I want to talk about identity and expressive utility. If anybody wants the paper, I published a paper recently on these topics. The concept of expressive utility is very important because in economics we usually focus on something called material utility. Material utility is the benefit that I have from consumption, my wealth, these types of sources of benefit. Expressive utility, as I define it, is the utility that you have from confirming your identity. So everyone has an identity, and this identity affects many things they do in life. So for example, if I go back to Professor Roberts, who has raised the issue of his tie must be part of his identity. If it was not, he would not have worn the tie. But how we dress, the clothes, the cars we drive. But I want to focus on what we say and who we vote for. So I want to focus on what I call low-cost decisions. Because a tie is low cost, but not zero cost. But what I say is very low cost. It's just rhetoric. All kittens should have a home. And how I vote is very low cost. Now with voting, there are two issues. One issue is, why do you vote? Now in the textbooks, including in my textbook, we point out that the probability that your vote will be decisive is basically zero. In Hebrew they say, tatzbiya v'mashpiya, right? It's not true. The likelihood that your vote will be decisive is zero. And therefore, if you believe that your vote is an instrument for achieving outcomes, you have to rethink, because the expected benefit of your vote in that sense is zero. And voting is costly. It's not highly costly, but you do have to go down there, maybe stand in a queue, and you have to vote. So if voting was based on cost-benefit analysis with the objective being that you will influence something in terms of policy, then I wish to inform you that you are delusional. But I vote because I was told as a child, let's suppose, that in democracy I should exercise my right to vote, and that it's antisocial not to vote. Let's accept that. Let's accept that's the reason why we vote. We don't want to demonstrate that we're apathetic. Then the question arises, when you come to the polling booth, you have to decide how to vote. And the cost of how to vote is zero. Because you have, in our country at least, a range of little notes. I must tell you, over the years, Sam and also some people knew me decades ago, and then what's happening over the years is that I lose words in English. I was about, and in fact, my best language is a combination of 3 languages, which is Yiddish, which is my mother tongue, Hebrew and English, and I was about to say you choose a petek. And I don't know exactly what the English word is for a petek. It's a little white slip of paper that has a symbol on it, and this symbol is then used for you to identify who you intend to vote for.
A ballot.
I don't associate a ballot with a piece of paper. Thank you for the. I thank you for the suggestion, but it's a ballot slip, maybe. Anyway, it doesn't matter. When you vote, you do something that has very low cost and doesn't determine anything in your life. And rhetoric is the same. Let me give some background, a couple of moments on behavioral economics. Behavioral economics, which you may know about, but maybe not everybody does, was influenced in recent years by essentially 2 psychologists who formerly were Israelis and now became Americans. They were at Tversky. Tversky unfortunately passed away, and then the other guy, what's his name? Kahneman from Princeton, and others as well. And now behavioral economics, I edit a journal, an economics journal, and I find that behavioral economics is taking over nearly everything, because we economists now realize that the idea that we can explain behavior based on axioms of rationality is not useful for what happens in the world. People are truly irrational, and I think, and we all think based on the evidence, some people are quite stupid. Now, you know people are quite stupid, and you know that there's a distribution of intelligence, ability, capacity to understand, and we economists tended all the time to ignore this and to suggest that here was what a rational person would do, and this is predicting the world for us. I want to talk a little bit about perhaps altruism and envy and emotions. And there's a whole range of irrational human behavior that I could talk about. There's a concept called hyperbolic discounting, which is very important. It's a fancy way of saying that people just have very, very short time horizons. So I go around the campus asking students, why are you smoking? Don't you know that if you reach my age, you'll be a very poor specimen of a human if you keep smoking this much? And they say, lo ichpat li, I don't care. I used to, when I was younger, tell my friends, don't drink a bottle of vodka in one night, because you'll regret in the morning what you did. But the irrationality is that in the morning they say, I was stupid yesterday for doing that. So they split their personality. The person who did what was done yesterday is not the person that suffers today. There's a whole range of these type of issues. A lot of experimental evidence I want to come back to. But I think in time that I have, I want to focus on expressive behavior, which may or may not be rational. I'll let you decide in the end. My view of expressive behavior is it's quite rational. And where am I going? I'm going where perhaps Professor Russell Roberts has already taken us. I'm going to where people tell us that we do not have a social conscience, we are not nice people. But the reason they are telling us that is because they are telling us something about themselves. It is, as Adam Smith told us many centuries ago, people like to be liked. It's very important to be popular. And the way to be popular is to say nice things and to vote for nice things. But when you say nice things, it's costless, but not expressively irrelevant. It's only costless in terms of material benefit. But when I say something nice, people say, that's a nice man. I like him. Do you want to have a beer with me? Do you want to have coffee? Can we invite you to dinner? But if we come along and we see things that are regarded as not nice, we put too much emphasis on efficiency, not enough emphasis on helping people in distress. If we say that moral hazard, adverse selection are impediments to kind behavior, we compromise the way that other people look at us. I believe in Israel that this is what the left does. Looking at what the left and the right do, I don't think they do much that differs. But they certainly speak differently. Their rhetoric is different, and they vote differently. And this is why the rich in Israel are left-wing. In experiments on expressive voting, students were told that they can give money to charity or keep the money for themselves. And they were told the likelihood of being decisive in votes. So the decision was not personal, but whether the money was kept or given to charity was based on the outcome of voting. In the first experiments which were reported in a journal called Public Choice, some decades ago, they were surprised that actually the students voted to give the money to charity whether or not they would be decisive. Their hypothesis was, if I'm decisive, I'll vote to keep the money for myself. But if my vote is purely expressive, then I'll vote to give the money away because my vote doesn't matter because I'm not decisive. So people are expressive also in terms of wanting to feel that they're nice people. Actually, this experiment, the first experiment, I thought was rather problematical because the students were chosen from the College of the Immaculate Heart of Conception of the Virgin or something, some upstate New York school which is basically Catholic. And I'm sure that ethics and charity were basic to the education of these students. So I would have expected these students to be expressive in terms of voting for goodness, voting for nice things, independently of personal gain. My theory of expressiveness is based on everyone here choosing who they want to be. You can choose to be a free market economist. You can choose to be a socialist, a communist. You can choose to be in favor of the peace, Ba'da Shalom. And you can lecture to me about how important that peace is. I remember buses exploding. I would ask left-wingers, how many buses have to explode before you believe that this is not a path to true peace? And they would say, I don't care. So you choose who you want to be, and it may be that what you choose to be is important if one day you do something about it. But if all you do is talk and vote, you are free to choose to be somebody nice. And it's rational to be somebody nice. And then we deliver a message about what are the consequences of being nice. And this message was delivered very eloquently and very well by Professor Roberts. And people who don't want to hear that, they feel unhappy in our company, basically. I could talk about the behavior of political candidates, the behavior of political incumbents, and the behavior of voters. In a political system, all of these types of behavior are influenced by being expressive. But let's talk about let's talk about voters, because we are voters. So, as I've said, why do people vote? Sense of duty. And how do they vote? And are people irrational in believing that they'll be decisive? Now, the last thing I want to do is to convince you people not to vote. There are audiences where I'd love to convince everybody not to vote. But my feeling is that in this audience, I would like most of you to vote. So do not take this as an attack on your rationality when you vote. But how do I know people are expressive? What's my evidence? My evidence comes from various experiments that economists now do. We economists now behave like psychologists, and we put students in situations where they have to choose what to do, and we record it, and some of us publish it. I have a lot of reservations about the use of economic students in particular as a representative of mankind. We know from the evidence that economic students are strange. When you juxtapose economic students against social workers, political scientists, and others, economists tend to be a little bit more expressive in the context of not wanting to be a fool. Economists also have their identity. But the identity of an economist is, let's be efficient. Let's put weight on efficiency, and let's not just care about platitudes of social justice that we can't influence. Now, I have got friends who say, I'm sorry I voted for Obama. These are Americans or Israelis, people living here with a right to vote. Now, what does it mean they're sorry that they voted for Obama? It only means they're expressive. Because had they changed their vote, had they not voted for Obama, the outcome of the election would have been the same. So all they're saying is, I feel my identity has been betrayed because I expressed an identity in voting for this man, and now I've been made a fool of. So this is strong evidence. Or people also vote to punish. They say, I'm going to vote against this person, this candidate. I don't like what this candidate did. It's expressive. It's got nothing to do with the outcomes that will emerge. So, what is the identity that you choose? There is a literature by Akerlof and Cranton. I have a book recently. This literature looks at identity in the context of the more economic questions. And there are very interesting issues here that you might want to look at, such as they find that if a group of male carpenters is joined by a woman carpenter, that the males feel threatened. They don't want the woman. Why? Their identity. This was a job for males. They find also, for example, that women, when they explain why women living together with a male in marriage or otherwise tend to do disproportionately the housework, even when they both work. And they explain it as that the woman does not want to emasculate the man, because the woman realizes the identity of the man of being a male is very important to her, and recognizing this expressive benefit of her actions of doing the housework, she does the housework. So if you're interested in these types of sources of identity, you can go to Akerlof and Cranton. Now, sometimes identity is predetermined. It's very important to me. I've been thinking over the years. I grew up with two parents who survived. I was born just after the war in Germany. And one of the things I've been trying to understand recently is anti-Semitism. It's very interesting for an economist. Historians tell us what happened. They hardly ever tell us why it happened. And in that case, the identity is predetermined. You're a Jew. Of course, my father told me, in response to a question, what was the question? I said once to my father, you have a small business now. I said it all in Yiddish. Das ist ein klein Geschäft. You've got a small business now. why are you still voting for the left? You should be voting now for private property, low taxes, and markets. And my father said, may he rest in peace, he said, you don't understand. He said, just as the war was, when we were in Poland, we would approach the non-Jew Pole and we would say to him, we are all workers together and the enemy is the capitalist. So identifying with the left allowed a redivision of identity. That it was no longer Jew against Christian or anti-Semite against Jew. It was we workers against privilege. Norman Porterhouse has written a very interesting book, of which I've published now an extended book review, if anybody wants, in the last issue of Public Choice. He wrote a book called Why Are Jews Liberals? He was trying to understand why American Jews are liberals. Liberals, of course, we are confused because when Americans talk about liberals, they talk about people of the left. And when we talk about liberals, we talk about people for whom markets, property rights are important. But I assume you know the context, so I can talk about American liberals. And he identifies these same origins of why Jews vote for the left. So Jews vote for the left independently of their wealth. I used to go around my upper middle class neighborhood, now upper middle class. It was strawberry fields when we first bought a house there. There was no other. It was the periphery of the metropolitan area, and we wanted a house, not an apartment. And then the wealthy came and surrounded us. And then I asked them, why are you voting for the Labour Party? That would be okay, but basically they're merits. And they say to me, if everybody was like us, we would have peace by now. It's because of people like you that there's no peace. See, it's identity. I'm a nice person. Everybody likes me. I get along with everybody. If it was me, we'd have peace. There's no point arguing with these people. When I was younger, I was naive in the sense that I believed that I could convince people of something. This has to do with people in this country, Jews in this country, and non-Jews outside of our country. But people want to believe what they want to believe, and they believe what makes them feel best about themselves. And if they want to believe that because of them they would achieve peace. And this is one of the basic delusions of this country. I mean, who came here? In the first instance, the people that came to live here from Europe chose to be everything that Jews are not. They became farmers. They desecrated the Shabbat. They didn't care about Shabbos. They didn't even care about Yom Kippur, some of them. They chose not to educate their children in Jewish tradition. And they did one remarkable thing that Jews hadn't done for 2,000 years. They defended themselves. And because of that, we have the state. But that's the ideology that we have. A Jew who doesn't want to be a Jew. In America, it's very easy for that Jew not to be a Jew. Blends in somewhere, marries somebody, goes away somewhere. It's very difficult, I believe, for Jews in Israel who don't want to be Jews. Because all of the trappings of the state surround them and our culture surround them, and they're very frustrated. So we have the paradox in this country that the left was somehow socialist, and at the same time the left in this country was wealthy. Because the left in this country are the elites, or they used to be, not anymore. But when I first came here decades ago, we know that the officers of Tzahal and the Air Force, it was all boys from the kibbutzim. Yes, I have this. I only ever had once one cartoon on my door at the university. Don't like these cartoons. But I did have a cartoon about a psychiatrist and a man who was saying to the psychiatrist, what do you mean that my situation, my condition has improved? Yesterday I was Napoleon, and today I'm nobody. Now, this is very, very important. I don't say this as a joke. You can choose to be Napoleon when you get up in the morning. The important thing is you can choose to be who you are not. This whole idea was begun by a man who, in my view, should have the Nobel Prize, Gordon Tullock, but the Swedes won't give it to him for reasons that we can discuss. And Gordon, unfortunately, is not so well now. But he wrote a paper in 1971, he published in 1971, called The Charity of the Uncharitable. So, what is the charity of the uncharitable? They vote to give other people's money to charity, hoping they will be in the minority. You don't want to really be in the majority, because in the majority, you would actually have to pay the taxes to give the money. So the benefit, according to Gordon Tullock, was purely expressive. So, a little symbolism. I would look at, in my view of what we economists call utility and normal people call benefit. We say benefit is composed, I would say it's composed of three elements. My expressive benefit. I'm sure someone will ask me, were you being expressive when you told us about being expressive? And then there's material utility that anyone who studies economics, this is what you study. Utility from consumption, from wealth, and the like. And of course, there's interdependent utility. Now, what interdependent utility for us economists, it's altruism. It's charity. So Russell talked about that. We do care. We do have a history in our people of tzedakah. We do care. I am told that in the villages in Poland before the war, the poorest family for Shabbos still had what to eat. This was at the communal level. So there is an issue of do we do nice things because we are altruistic, or do we do nice things because we're expressive? In the time that I have here, I'll proceed by examples. I was in Beijing with my wife Jeanette not that long ago, and I witnessed a grandmother and a mother simultaneously seeking to spoon feed a child of about 2.5. Now, you know, due to the one-child policy, this is what they have. And it was clear to me that this child did not want to eat anymore. So the reason that the mother and the grandmother were trying to spoon feed this child was expressiveness. It was not altruism. It was not a feeling for the child. If they care about the child, they would stop trying to force feed the child. I have another anecdote. I once went with some graduate students and some people. I went to a poor country. And I was the economist. And a child of about 10 came towards us selling chewing gum. I asked the child, through an interpreter, shouldn't you be in school now? It's not school vacation. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. Child said, yes, I should be in school now, but I'm selling gum. Would you like some gum? Now, the others around me, this was their chance to be expressive. They could now show what nice people they are by buying the gum from this kid. And I said, no, none of us buys gum from this kid, from this child. This child should be in school. If we buy gum from this child will be out on the street again tomorrow selling gum. But if we send the child back, having sold no gum, this child will in all likelihood be sent to school, or perhaps. They looked at me, didn't say anything. And I thought they'd actually understood what I said. So we went away, and I went this way looking at some little shop, and I saw them going this way. But then I saw them running after the child. And they bought gum from the child. So they didn't buy gum from the child to help the child. I made it clear that this was detrimental to the child. They bought the gum for their own expressive utility, to show they are nice people. The phenomenon we should address in our country is a miracle of sorts. That Meretz has 3 seats in the parliament, that the Labour Party, which was the party of the intellectuals and the people that were born to rule us, have what? I don't know who they are anymore, 5 seats, and then there's another party, Atzmaut, but obviously they're very marginal now. And the main opposition party is just a break-off of the Likud and has people that should be in the Likud, but out of opportunism went with the other guys. So it's not something's happened. And therefore the question we now have to ask is, how was the expressive behavior in Israel broken? How was it changed? Even in my own neighborhood, I must say. Something remarkable I heard a couple of days ago. The person in our neighborhood, expressively extreme left, who always says that if everybody was kind and nice like him, we'd have peace, and we should be kind to everybody, saw someone reading Iton Haaretz, the newspaper Haaretz, and said, yes, that newspaper is for people who think, but it's for people who think that they think. Well, when he says that, who's left? So what we have now is a complete swing of expressiveness. Before I come to that, those of you who know a little bit of game theory, a little bit of game theory. Here's a game that's well known. A game, for those of you who perhaps are not, a game is not a game. It's not a game like children play games. There's a field of economics called game theory, which Professor Hillman received the Nobel Prize for recently. Game theory looks at behavior where what you do influences what other people do, the strategic interaction. There are a number of very well-known games. This is a well-known game that I have adapted. This game is actually called the volunteer game. And the idea with the volunteer game is that someone has to volunteer to do something nice, beneficial for everybody, and everybody benefits from what the nice person does, but there's a cost imposed. In the game that I have here, I have 2 people and they have to vote for or against giving money to somebody. They call it an income transfer. It's what economists talk about when they say you take money from one person, give it to another. And the idea here is actually that this person is non-deserving. This is a person that could work for a living, has decided to exploit the benevolence of society and not work. And everybody knows this person basically is exploitative and could work. So there are 2 people here. Now, the way I've set this up is, I'll just show you the numbers, or maybe I'll go back to this. Now, if you vote in favor of giving the money, then you get a benefit of 1. But if you actually have to pay the money, you lose 2. The best outcome for anybody, see the number 1? 1's the largest number there. How do you get a benefit of 1, which is the largest benefit? You get a benefit of 1 by voting to give the money to the poor person who's not so lazy, but hoping that I will veto. This is called a veto game. Now, if I veto and I say, no, I won't put up with this, I end up with 0, and the person who's nice ends up with 1. The worst situation for all of us here in this game is there are 2 people, myself and Sam, and both of us decide we're going to vote to give the money to the poor person. We're both voting expressively. We lose 2 by giving the money. We gain 1 by voting. And there's utility of voting and disutility of giving. And so we end up with -1, -1. An analog of this game is it's Christian Andersen's story about the king had no clothes. So a little kid said, the king has no clothes. Everybody knew that the king had no clothes. There's a distinction in game theory between common knowledge and public knowledge. And it's very important mathematically. Public knowledge, everybody knows. Common knowledge, everybody knows that everybody knows. When everybody knows that everybody knows, the outcomes are very different. Anyway, the little kid in Hans Christian Andersen's The King Has No Clothes, and he was actually the volunteer because maybe he was spanked. And maybe everybody else said, "You naughty little child, of course the king has clothes." But the little kid maybe did some good. So if there's people around here who say collective property, big government is not beneficial for mankind, he will incur disutility. And as he said, he may not have many friends, but he will try to convince others, which I appreciate very much. The peace process here cannot be ignored. Those of us that in 1992 said this is not going to lead us anywhere, it's going to lead to death and terror. And when we said that, we were accused of being against peace. And we had to express its disutility. I don't like to be told, and my friends don't like to be told, that we are nasty and that we are not nice, and it's because of our failure to recognize how the other side is looking for some compromise, and we say, well, compromise as much as you like, it seems to be existential, as our Prime Minister told the Congress the other day. It's another example. So let me go back to my last question. Voting. I've got lots of examples. I'll just move on a bit. I've talked about rhetoric. Populism is interesting. I'll just mention populism. Populist voters ask for things from politicians which are not feasible. They say to the politician, I want stability of the price level, I want complete full employment, I want all kittens to have homes, and I want all poor people to be taken care of, and I want people to have incentives to work. A clever politician will say, fine, I'll give it to you. So there's literature on populism. Do we have populism in Israel? Anybody who said, vote for me and I'll give you peace. That's populism in our country. Because everybody knew in their heart they were asking for something that, under the circumstances in which we live, as much as we want, cannot be delivered. So populism is a very interesting concept. The media are very important because the media actually, the literature shows, and we have evidence, people read the newspaper that tells them what they want to hear. There is a discussion in literature as to whether the media affect what people think or what people think affects what the media writes. I'm trying to study this now in the context of European media. I want to know where their anti-Semitism comes from, whether they are influencing opinion or whether opinion is influencing them. And then there are expressive political parties. The best example perhaps is New Labour in the UK and also in Australia. What is New Labour? New Labour is our labour. New Labour is you can be rich, you can believe that you are a kind, nice person, define yourself as a socialist, but don't worry, when we come to power, we will not adopt these policies. And in fact, the problem is, as I believe with Obama, is doesn't he realize that the people who voted for him were expressive? That was a way of, if people waited up to 4 hours to vote for him, the benefit of voting for him must be worth 4 hours of waiting. And the benefit, what was the benefit? My American friends will tell me. Those who you've chosen to live your lives there and you have insights that I don't have. But it must be, was it guilt? That now we can really say that although they were slaves, they can actually become president. But of course, this is not a descendant of slaves. This was a descendant of a Kenyan Muslim and a very rich family from Hawaii. But nonetheless, facts don't matter. All that matters is how I can be expressive. So I combine all these things. This is my last question. How do we avoid these expressive policy traps? Well, we all want to feel nice, and we end up in something we don't want. And I think in Israel, we lead in many ways. I shall not now give you a list of all the things that I believe that we have been instrumental in bringing to the attention of people, beginning with ethics, going back 4,000 years. But I think we've solved this problem as well, because none of the usual remedies of economics would solve what we call in economics externalities. Externality means you affect me through your expressive behavior. You want to look nice, but in looking nice, you cause harm, not you. People who want to look nice can cause harm to others. So I think in our case, we've had what we call salient events. And these salient events can change how people look at themselves, think about themselves. And I think these salient events will be our salvation. So I will stop with that, and there may be some time for questions.